Let's discuss all of this now with Pete Seed, a former White House spokesman for the Bush administration. Also with us, Alencia Johnson, former senior advisor to President Biden's 2020 campaign. Alencia, you worked on the Biden 2020 campaign. What does it say to you that these are the people, his family, Jill Biden, Hunter Biden, Valerie Owens, his sister, who are having these discussions about a potential exit plan?
Well, listen, this means that it's a very serious conversation, right? These are the people that he really listens to. But I want to be very clear here. You know, the reason that we're having a lot of this discussion is because there are party elites who continue to drive this conversation that he cannot beat Donald Trump. And yet, just before this program, you saw Senator Bernie Sanders on MSNBC staunchly supporting President Joe Biden. That shows you progressive leadership. You also have Congressional Hispanic Caucus leadership, the Congressional Black Caucus leadership. You have voters on the ground, Black and Latino voters, who are saying, hey, we want to move forward because we have a plan. We have issues that actually can beat the other side. And so I think this conversation is a matter of how do we get back focused on the campaign to win in November, and President Biden has to make that decision firmly footed. And I think that's a conversation he's probably having with his family. But the reality is there are a lot of people in our coalition that still want to support President Biden.
So there is that internal conflict, obviously. Pete, what's your reaction to where we are right now?
Well, all this sounds awfully Trumpian to me, right? You listen to the Biden campaign, to Jen O'Malley Dillon on Morning Joe, and they're dismissive of polls that they don't like. They lean on this idea of a silent majority. She effectively said, you know, for every one senator who comes out and says withdraw from the race, there are 30 who are privately calling us and telling us to stick it out. Well, where are those people publicly? Why aren't they saying those things publicly? It's so unbelievably, if you took some of these quotes and put them on a screen without attribution and asked the American people who said this, they would probably think it was Donald Trump. And it turns out it's Joe Biden and his team not seeing the reality. They have this belief that loyalty is marching to defeat when loyalty is telling Joe Biden what he doesn't want to hear.
Alencia, you talk about it being the party elites, and some may describe them this way, but they're also people who I think deeply care about President Biden, people like his former president that he served alongside, President Obama, who is expressing concerns about the path forward for Joe Biden if he stays on the ticket. We also have reporting that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries have all had conversations with Biden about the realistic chances of winning re-election, the impacts on the down ballot races, House, the Senate, all involved here. And yes, we know it. He is somebody who is not wired to quit. This is what we were told specifically, especially in the face of big adversity.
That's right.
But how much could that political pressure impact his decision?
Look, it's mounting political pressure, and I actually have to disagree with what was just said by the other guests. There are a lot of party leadership out here still supporting President Biden. Again, Senator Bernie Sanders, I don't know what bigger beyond Chuck Schumer that is to have that support. But I think this conversation that's happening, it's two conversations happening. This one that's a browbeating, he absolutely has to get out of the race, or voters, you absolutely have to get in line with President Biden, versus the conversation that brings all of the voters involved, which is there can be concerns. How do we move forward whether or not he stays in the race? And what are the issues that will have voters showing up in November? You had a letter that came out yesterday with 1,400 Black women in these states that we need to win, saying that they support President Biden. And so the Biden campaign has to weigh what they're hearing on the ground with, yes, the people that care about him, the Nancy Pelosi's, the President Obama's. How do you reconcile that when you're hearing two different conversations? And I do think it's imperative that they're doing that. I just want to make sure that the tone coming from both sides of this faction actually thinks about the existential crisis that we have on the other side.
Well, Democrats are all on the same team, I guess is what I'm hearing you say. Yes. Pete, if Biden did step aside, and to be clear, that has not happened yet. His campaign has repeatedly said they intend to be on the ballot in November. But if it does happen, then what? There's obviously not a lot of time to figure this out. Yeah,
well, it seems more than likely, if it does happen, that Vice President Kamala Harris would become the nominee for the Democratic Party. And I know coming out of the Republican National Convention, a lot of Republicans, the delegates, are on an emotional and spiritual high. They think that Donald Trump could beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl right now. But I would just caution everyone to say Kamala Harris is formidable insofar as that she is not Joe Biden. At this point, I think my mini golden doodle, Paxson, could probably fare better against Donald Trump than Joe Biden in November. Democrats need to get realistic about this and what is happening. And I don't necessarily want Democrats to win, but it also concerns me just as an American watching the sitting president of the United States have these challenges everywhere he goes, not just one night at a debate, but interviews and on the world stage. It's constantly happening. And the American people have caught on. You see the polling. They think he's too old to continue, and they're not interested in him being their nominee.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.